Welcome to the Be Well podcast, wellness backed by science, bringing you inspiring conversations to help you on your wellness journey to a healthier, happier you. Brought to you by Breast Cancer UK. You can start your personal prevention journey right now by taking our prevention quiz. Just click on the link in the show notes. So can you maybe talk us through some of the common ways in which we absorb PFAS through the skin?
Well, I think it would be, if you think about it, it's going to be via like products that come into contact with skin. So we know that PFAS have the potential to be present in like outdoor clothing, for example. PFAS are generally used in that sort of situation because they're both waterproof and stain-proof. So if you think about it, if you have some clothing and it comes into contact with your skin, it's also you're wearing it for some time, it's prolonged contact. Quite often you'll find in sort of furniture, particularly in sort of like public situations, the sort of fabrics will be stain-proofed. And you can kind of understand why people might have that. And certainly I had the experience maybe 10, 15 years ago when we were buying a new car and the salesman offered us, some stain-proofing for our car. My wife said I was a bit too vehement in my refusal of that, because I'm pretty sure that, particularly at that time, that PFAS would definitely have been involved. So things like Scotch Guard, but people would be very familiar with that back in the day, would certainly have contained like PFAS. There are, rather scarily, like cosmetics, for example, that contain PFAS. Again, we have to qualify that with the fact that there are relatively few PFAS for which we have really good evidence for adverse effects. And that small number, is dwarfed by the number of PFAS that we don't know what the effects are.
Do you think, first of all, that the British public, outside of your whole kind of academic and regulatory sphere, do you think they have a general knowledge about these products? And do they understand that they can be maybe not as safe as we would hope?
I think, frankly, that the general public are just not that aware of that. There will be people who will have more of an interest in sort of what they're exposed to in things, but generally speaking, people won't be. And I kind of understand that, because I think we're all getting along with our own lives. We have lots of other things to be sort of thinking about. And I think there is a sort of implicit sort of belief within people that no one's going to put stuff in that might possibly harm us. In your studies, you look specifically at what we inhale and the chemicals that we inhale indoors, like inside our home or, in offices. Can you give us a little bit of insight into that study and what you found? Yeah, I think looking at indoor air is something that we've looked at for 25 years or so for various chemicals. For a lot of these chemicals, probably the main exposure pathway for a lot of people is via the food we eat. And if you look at what's outdoors, because there's such a vast volume of air and there's winds blowing things around and diluting things, actually the concentrations tend to get diluted and therefore lower. We also find that a lot of the sources for the sorts of chemicals we're talking about, like PFAS, because they're present in products we use indoors, or like the flame retardants, the same sort of thing, the sources where they're being emitted from are indoors. And then if you think about it, how much time have you spent today outdoors?
Much less than I've spent indoors.
Yeah. So I think, as a rough guide, probably a typical person in a sort of northwestern European country such as the UK would probably spend something like 10% of their time outdoors. So little. 90% of your time is spent indoors. Do you feel that food actually is a good supplement for the other interventions that you might offer as a GP?
Absolutely. If we look at a lot of chronic disease, which is pretty much bread and butter, what I see in general practice, things like type 2 diabetes, obesity, they're all very much linked with food. And we know that food and lifestyle can have a huge impact on those particular diseases. So, 100% we can use food as a tool to supplement the medications.
And I think when people are motivated to make changes to their diet, they might be more susceptible to fads where they're encouraged to cut out certain food groups. What do you advise your readers on this?
Don't do it. But fad diets and, and I think we're also looking at some of those kind of really extreme diets. First of all, they're really difficult to maintain. So, I look online at some of these kind of carnivore diets that only eat meat and butter and, cutting out whole food groups like carbohydrates, things like that. You're going to really miss out on key nutrients. Carbohydrates could be anything from broccoli to, oats. Like, you're going to miss out on massive nutrient.
Can you share some tips for how to look after our gut? What are some of the benefits of maintaining a healthy gut? And is that gut microbiome? And is that something that you address a bit in your book as well?
Yes, it is. So, your gut microbiome are these trillions and trillions of microorganisms that are all throughout your guts, from your mouth down to your anus. So all throughout. And we now know, and there is so much more research coming out, but we know that they are involved in pretty much everything in your body, from your immunity, from cancer risk, as you said, from chronic disease, lots and lots of things. They control, a vast amount of body processes, and we're learning more and more every day. So it's really, really important to keep that gut microbiome happy.
I ended up being admitted to hospital with what turned out to be a stomach ulcer.
Oh my goodness.
Which I don't think, it wasn't entirely related to the alcohol, but that obviously made it a lot worse. And the doctor said the best thing you can do is stop drinking for a bit, give up fizzy drinks, give up caffeine, and stop vaping. I'm only 38 years old. I've got a young daughter.
Yeah.
I do not want to be spending time in hospital and being unwell because of things that I can change.
Yeah.
And I started to notice changes in my body. I was losing weight. My skin was better. My mental health.
Yeah.
I've had depression since my late teens. So much easier to cope with and manage. And I was just enjoying life so much more. Everything felt like it had gone from, black and white to technicolor. I couldn't believe the difference. And I haven't drunk, and everything is better. My whole life, I can't express enough. People say to me, well, how do you know when if you're thinking about giving up drinking, how do you know when it's right? And my response is, if you're thinking about it, it's right. It's the time. Just do it. You won't regret it.
What do you think is preventing them from not drinking? Is there social pressure? And what tips would you give to anyone who feels under pressure?
Yeah, there's definitely social pressure. I completely understand. And especially for people who are maybe in their 20s and their early 30s, who do maybe go out more, who are in those social situations more, who are attending lots of weddings, because that's the age, isn't it, where everyone's having, getting married, etc. It can be difficult. But I would say, if you are thinking about stopping drinking, you are ready to stop drinking. You just have to take that step and do it. Have that belief and that faith in yourself that you can do it, and be prepared for people to be judgmental about the fact that you've given up drinking. Have, your party line ready. If you don't want people to know initially that you've given up, or, you're attempting to give up, use something like, oh man, I'm on antibiotics. Or do what I did and kind of fake drink for a bit. If you're not quite ready yet to say to people that that's what you're doing. And when you are ready, say it loud and proud, because it shuts people down. If you're a bit kind of meek and worried about actually, no, I don't drink. That's when people pounce and go, oh, go and have one. When you say to someone, I don't drink, thank you, I'll have a lemonade.
Yeah.
When you say it with confidence, that tends to stop people then wanting to come back and push you into it. So I'm very much a problem solver by nature. And I think a lot of people who live with disabilities are.
Yeah.
You just naturally, because the world isn't built for us. So you approach every day with that sort of, overcoming obstacles and problem solving. And I think that filters into that positive attitude. Because if you see something that's a problem, you think, right, how are we going to solve this? How are we going to deal with this?
Can you share with us this experience and about how this life-threatening turn of events actually changed your whole outlook from a young age?
Yeah, definitely. So if we rewind back to 2017, I obviously acquired my disability from a very life-changing illness. E. coli, food poisoning infection, left me, as you said, with multi-organ failure. And the cruel twist of fate was I amazingly awoke from the coma, much to doctor's surprise, to even pull through it. But my sight had totally gone, which was a huge blow. So I had to relearn to live again without my eyesight. But on top of that, I was very poorly after the illness. So I had to go from learning to hold my head up again to learning to walk, to learning to navigate my new life, but without my eyesight, which made it 10 times more scary. And it was just a huge, huge setback in my life. It's something that was just totally unexpected, which I guess lots of health and illnesses are largely unexpected in our lives. We often don't know that they're coming.
Did you really believe when you entered the race that the medal was actually within your grasp?
Do you know what? I'm always ambitious. And I think if you didn't believe you could get your hands on that gold medal, you shouldn't be there. Because that's the last part of that extra push that you get in that race, thinking I could win this. So I knew we'd trained hard. I knew it was quite relatively early in both of our careers together, but I thought there was a chance. And I think that gave us that extra push because when you get to the last lap of that race, your legs are absolutely screaming. And that's when we won the gold medal by I think 0.3 of a second or something, which is very, very tight. It was a very, very exciting race for my poor parents to have to watch coming down to the last lap.
What you've said is that you've gained more than you've lost in this whole experience. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so obviously throwing myself into sport, again, not just at elite level, on a local level, I've made so many friends, way loads more social connections than I had even when I could see. And it's just really opened up a lot more doors to me. I found myself travelling the world in some incredible areas that I never would have dreamt of even venturing to when I could see. And a typical example of this is it's kind of encouraged me to step out of my comfort zone since getting into sport, because I had to go away with people I wasn't familiar with. And an example of that is even last week, I took a solo flight for my first time away and I took the assistants at the airport. I never even travelled on my own when I could see. I would have thought, well, this is daunting. But I actually found myself doing it whilst being blind. And you know what? I spoke to some lovely people on the plane. Just because of the position I was in, they realised I was on assistance and they wanted to be more chatty. And I just think when I could see, I probably would have just sat on the plane with my headphones in. So in a strange way, it's opened up so many avenues to me, just taking that step out of my comfort zone and seeing what's beyond there.
Can you explain the concept that you cover in your book really well of biomagnification?
Biomagnification, yeah.
Explain it in simple terms and how that relates to the food chain and how that also explains different levels of exposures that happens.
Yeah, it's quite a complex idea, but basically what it means is that bigger animals need more energy. So the higher we go, so the bigger the animal, the more food that they will eat, and any toxic load in that food will be increased. So the higher we go up a food chain, the more concentrated the chemical load is in that animal's body. Scientists are realising that, or they're finding that chemicals can work in combination, and this is frightening because of the number of chemicals now present in the wider environment. But basically, as chemicals come into contact with each other, if we're exposed to multiple chemicals at once, then they may have different levels of toxicity when combined. And this is frightening because it isn't possible for us to control those things once chemicals are already at large in our environment.
Talk to us a bit more about that, this kind of idea that mothers feel empowered by knowledge.
Yeah, it's been so moving to me since the book was released earlier this year to receive messages from readers who have said that, but because I was worried, partly in writing about these issues, that it was going to be anxiety inducing for new mothers. I knew that new mothers were probably going to read this book, and I was concerned about how to write about these issues in a way that will help rather than create anxiety. It's been very moving to receive messages from people who say that actually the book made them feel less isolated in their concern. That we do know now, there is a public awareness that our environments are polluted places, and there are a lot of headlines that are frightening. And so I guess what was important, maybe I'm moving away from the question here, but I guess what was important to me in thinking about how to write the book was how to give space for women to contact with some of the feelings that are brought up by these issues, and then to think about how to make a right response and how to feel out who they are as mothers.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Be Well podcast, brought to you by Breast Cancer UK, a prevention charity supporting people to build healthy, lifelong habits and reduce their risk of developing breast cancer. You can start your personal prevention journey right now by taking our prevention quiz. Just click on the link in the show notes.